happen. Our next speaker has a story to tell. Tom Chappell, with his wife Kate, founded a company called Tom's of Maine. Tom's is a company that produces innovative, natural care products in a caring and creative work environment. Tom's of Maine has been named one of the best 100 companies in the U.S. for working mothers by Working Mother magazine and one of the top 10 healthiest companies by Health magazine. Please join me in welcoming an innovator, an entrepreneur, and a champion, Mr. Tom Chappell.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. What a wonderful occasion. I'm just so pleased to be with you to have a chance to start this fantastic conference. I'm grateful to the Wege Foundation, Steelcase Corporation, and Grand Rapids Community College. It's exciting to me that I can come to another part of the country and to see such creative and committed thinking to such important purposes as what we're here for the next 2 days to participate in. It's really a joy, and I'm very, very grateful. As I think about being with you this morning, I'm imagining that as we all think about sustainability, it's a value that we're placing in some importance in our lives. And there are several values that we have that are important. Values are what I am here to talk about today, the values that we feel are important and we're passionate about individually, and that somehow we find a way to move those values into our work experience, maybe into the corporate core values thinking, and that we begin to think about how can we move forward in living, or how do we move forward in the marketplace by calling upon these values and seeing that they're driven into our operating practices. I think about values when I started with the help of my wife Kate and a friend Dick Spencer back in 1970. We were interested in doing something that was unique. We thought that we could do something that was good for people on the one hand, good for the environment, and good for us. In other words, in a for-profit making system, that was an unusual idea of integrating what was otherwise government work, the environment, and marketplace work, being part of the private sector. We thought we could bring them together in 1970 and make a business idea out of it. And so right from the founding of Tom's of Maine, we've never lost that idea. Those very strong principles: make something that is safe and effective and delighting our customer on the one hand, and do it in a way that's not going to harm the environment but actually contributes to a natural economy, and to do it in a for-profit system. That was our vision back in 1970. When I think about values that have become important to me over these 35 years, it has been a time, hasn't it? And it does take a while to sort of establish change. This morning I thought we could spend more time on what's the practice that we've had in making our values operate in all of our functional parts of the business. What are the measurements that we can look to today to say, this has happened because we have integrated our values in everything that we do, from who we hire, who finances us, who our customer is, how we promote. All of these things are driven by a very special set of values. So if we could, we're going to look now at some stories of how we were focused, probably, I'm going to say, almost 20 years, I beg your pardon, some 10 years into the business, we started to ask ourselves, because people were coming to me too often to ask me what I thought. I wanted to get more of the values spread around to everyone in the company and not make it some arbitrary decision on my part. So we wanted to go through a more formal process, and as we do in those planning moments, where are we going? How are we going to get there? What's the competition? What are our strengths and weaknesses? Those are the common questions we ask in strategic thinking. But do we ever ask, who are we? I've never been in a strategic planning process where we ask more about what drives us individually or what drives us as a group of people. So that's what we did that was different in bringing together our board of directors and our executive team. We sat around and said, what are we passionate about here? What do we care deeply about? What are we pretty good at doing? Where do some of our gifts come forth in what we do day in and day out? And so we became very focused on those questions. And it was a great process. For 2 days, we had a lot of newsprint, a lot of process, a lot of facilitation. We argued whether profit should be a value. Then we decided, yes, it was a value. Then we decided, was it number one or number whatever? And we couldn't make that decision, so we simply said, making money is a value for us, and it's just one of the things we expect of ourselves. Out of that conference, we determined, and we didn't have core values that said integrity, innovation. There was a lot of pressure on some of the people in the room to say, let's distill the language down into words like that. Other people were saying, I like the very straightforward way in which we've said it. Why don't we be authentic about it and recreate what we've said, so that when we have a statement, we called it not our list of core values, we called it our statement of beliefs. And we said, for instance, that we believe that human beings and nature are inherently worthy and deserving of our respect. If we have a statement like that in corporate policy and records, that's a lot to live up to. If we say we believe that, it changes everything about how we're going to work, because we say people and nature are inherently worthy. In addition to that, we would say things like, we think we need to create a safe and fulfilling work environment in which people can learn and grow. But at the end of it all, some 10 different statements that we made, probably the most powerful one was when we said, we believe that we can delight consumers with ingredients from nature in personal care products that are safe and effective, but are also financially going to lead to financial success, that are environmentally sustainable, and is done in a way that's responsible to the people involved. Socially responsible, environmentally sustainable, consumer delight, and financially successful. Those 4 values drive every decision that we make at Tom's of Maine. So we had to ask ourselves the question of, well, how are we going to do this? These sound nice. This would be good to put on the walls, but it's a long way from the walls to our bones. And we like that way of thinking about how we had to drive these core values into people's thinking. And when it comes down to it, we need to teach each other. We formed a strategic alliance with a nonprofit organization called the Saltwater Institute that teaches value-centered leadership. And we have 4 days, for instance, in which anyone new coming to the company, and I mean anybody, it doesn't matter what part of the company they work in, they take a 4-day course in value-centered leadership. And it's one in which they themselves are the subject, and they're asking these questions of, what do I care about deeply of themselves? What do I envision for a future? What can I do creatively to venture out to make this happen? These are some of the tools of values integration that we teach our people. And by teaching them better, helping them, facilitating a process in which they better understand themselves, we have happier people, people that are more attuned to the value of being part of a company that has its values. And so we spend 2 more days of training on what the values are of Tom's of Maine, and how we're implementing them, and how they can implement them. So Imagine that. No matter where you are in the company, whether you have an MBA, whether you have a PhD, or whether you simply want to come to work to fill toothpaste tubes, you take the same course, the same amount of time, because values are that important to us. And unless it seeps through the system, it's not going to work. We do other things like being sure that these values are in role descriptions, in assessment, performance assessment, so that cultural competencies are mentioned, or that they're rewarded according not only to financial benchmarks or performance benchmarks, but what other ways have they been creative and instrumental in bringing along values that are important. I had to take a moment last week and pause and really ask myself, what have we created here? When my COO, wonderful young man that's been with us 8 years, came to me and he said, you know, Tom, what you do that I'm not sure you're aware of is that you champion values in this company. And what that means to the rest of us is that we have permission to champion those values too, and that we can come up with ideas. And I thought you'd be interested to know, he said, that we have just worked out an agreement at our manufacturing facility such that we will be the first factory in Maine to be 100% powered by wind energy. I was stunned. I hadn't been part of any discussion. I didn't need to be part of any discussion. I was just being told, here's the outcome. And sure, it was tied to how much it costs versus petroleum and so forth. But there was very little difference. But the exciting thing is that our people were thinking about how to drive the values into the company. Well, there is some theory behind this, so I do want to just touch on it. And that is, when I was at divinity school, I had a chance midway through my professional life to take time out and really study the philosophies and philosophers of the world, and what might we appropriate in bringing that back into the life at Tom's of Maine. So in 1985, I then pursued for the next 4 years, going half-time to the divinity school, a master's of theological studies, which allowed me to really put together my own fabric of what it was I cared about in what I was reading. I wasn't trying to move on to become a professor or a teacher. I was a student of the marketplace, asking how could the marketplace be more responsible? How could the corporation be more responsible? How could we as a community be more responsible? And what I learned was profound to me, and I was actually a little irritated that I hadn't learned it before. But thank goodness I did pick it up. And the first was the notion that was introduced to me by Jonathan Edwards, a 18th century theologian who said, the nature of being is relation. And I thought about that, and I thought about words that had been part of my vocabulary, like interdependent and interconnected. But I had never heard anybody say that the nature of being is relation. I thought about whether or not the fact that I had started my own business and I had a piece of legal document that said we were free enterprise in this country of America, and that I owned the company, I felt in that I had some privileges and some rights. But now I was being told that the true nature of being is not privacy and rights. The true nature is interconnectedness, because we all affect each other in everything that we do. And so I asked myself, well, how would that be in the corporation? And I drew this diagram that you see here of the various entities with which we are interconnected. The environment, each other, the customer, the government, the suppliers, the future, ourselves and the health of the business. All of these became entities that I envisioned as our interconnected scheme of doing business. And then I said, truly, the bonds that connect us with each of these entities has a moral obligation. And I love this debate that we get into in public about whether or not the corporation is amoral or moral. For me, it's totally moral, because the business is the agents of the business. We are the agents of the business. And we agents are human beings, and we human beings are inherently interrelated to one another. Therefore, we have to recognize the bonds, the responsibilities that we have in what we do while we're in pursuit of growth and profitability. So I was very taken by this idea, and a second idea that came to me on this next slide was the idea of Martin Buber, a theologian more of the early 20th century, said, really, we human beings have a capacity to be in one of two mindsets. One mindset is that we're in some kind of relationship in our thinking to the other, in which we're calculating some gain out of the relationship. Well, I certainly recognize that in business. Not only were we using materials and people as objects to create profit and wealth, market share and so forth, but our whole language, like leveraging such and such a relationship, it was all about calculating some kind of gain. Buber said, there's another mindset that we're in, and that's when we're thinking about the awe and beauty of a relationship. It needs no more improvement. It's already so profound that we stand in awe and humility and gratitude that it is something we can experience. It is ultimate. Buber said, we really need to move in and out of these two worlds like some kind of shuttle, or we need to learn to operate in such a way that we're honoring both worlds, that they eventually become one in our thinking. And again, I was profoundly moved by how we could be intentional about bringing that world of beauty, respect, awe into the world of working with each other to produce sales and profits. And so when I think about values, I think about this integrated reality of what I call values integration, value centering. It's really an integrated reality. It's not either or. You hear us speak about both and or either or. It's the world of both and, integrated. It's holistic in the way it thinks. We're thinking about head and heart. We're thinking about the total person. It's thinking about a world that is interdependent and not isolated, and it's one, thank goodness, that is human. We do not need a professional degree to understand values. We just need to be human. And then I thought, it also requires intentionality, because in order for me to get out of my thinking of calculating gain, I need to be intentional about incorporating this other view of the inherent worth of someone or nature. And so I realized that we needed to be intentional. It needed some different tools for integration, and this next slide talks about the tools of integrating the two worlds. If we could go to the next slide, and that is the 7 intentions of value-centered leadership. These are the tools that we teach in leadership at Tom's of Maine. The Saltwater Institute, our 501c3 educational foundation, teaches other leaders, other CEOs, other leadership teams on these tools. And just briefly, some of them, how do they work? We begin the work connecting with goodness. It's not a profound idea. It's just not something that we're very intentional about. If I go to the Meyer Corporation to have a sales interview, we start with a connecting exercise. And that's interesting. They're waiting with their computer printouts to tell me how we're doing and what we're going to do together to build a business together, and I'm saying, well, let's finish this connecting with goodness exercise. The wonderful thing is that we're all human, and we all know how to do it, and it works, and it gets us in a wider circle in which each of us is a part of the circle, and no one of us is at the center of the circle. We're working together for the common cause. Know thyself, very fundamental part of operating with values. If we don't know who we are, we don't know what our values are. Therefore, we can't operate with them. This step of figuring out what we care about deeply, and if you would, just take, I'm going to ask you to take 60 seconds and reflect on one or two, even three, one or two values that you feel passionately about, that if you don't have it, it's not you. For instance, for me, if I am not out in nature, I don't know who I am. I need to have the wind in my face. I love the snow blowing in my face. I need to feel the currents on the water. I need to have my fingers and my knees in the soil of my garden. It's a value I can't be without. Let me give you a few seconds to record your thoughts on your values, because you'll be able to take that with you. I'll finish that up. Thank you. Well, let's move now from the world of theory to practice, and then finally we'll wrap up with some measurement. How are we putting these practices to work at Tom's of Maine? If we could go to the next slide, we have here this idea of formulating our products with natural ingredients that are safe and effective. What that means is that we can't work with synthetic ingredients. It would make our problem solving so much easier if our chemists could work with synthetics. It would make the cost of doing business so much cheaper if we could work with disposable containers. But it's not allowable in our system. Now, it's not enough to say, let's be natural. There's no government definition of natural. We have had to develop the standard for natural internally, and so we have done just that with what we call our stewardship model. If we could go, for instance, to slide 10, we can look at let's see, we want to go to slide 10 if we can. I don't have my little control. Are we at slide 10 yet? There we are, great. And then if we could to the next slide, the stewardship model is talking here on this slide about what is the standard for natural at Tom's of Maine. Our chemists have to be sure that this ingredient is sourced in nature, that it's a simple and understandable ingredient in the eyes of the consumer, that it's free of artificial preservatives, colors, sweeteners, fragrances, and so forth, and other additives, that it's free of animal ingredients. It's subject to limited processing. And wherever possible, we're moving more and more towards organically grown sources of our materials. These are very tough standards to make a toothpaste for you, a deodorant for you, or a shampoo, or anything else. These constraints are what make us who we are, to ourselves and to our customers and distinctively in the marketplace. The next slide talks about our standards for sustainable. We need to be sure that what we're doing is contributing to both environmental and economic sustainability. Are we doing something here that is in the interest of our communities and our people? Have we established safety and efficacy standards? Have we demonstrated the safety and efficacy of these? And again, example like not being able to test on animals when the government said to us in the mid-90s, if you're going to make a toothpaste that is an anti-cavity toothpaste, that particular claim requires that you test on animals. We said we don't test on animals. It's our policy not to test on animals. They said, you've got a problem. I said, yes, I know we have a problem, but it's not a problem I can solve without you. And they said, what do you mean? I said, testing on animals is not an option for Tom's of Maine. And they said to me at the FDA, are you religious or something? I said, I might be, but that doesn't matter. The point is that 50% of my business will go away, and the millions of people using that product will no longer use that product if I test on animals. I said, if your interest is to establish safety and efficacy of this particular toothpaste, we have human clinicals to demonstrate that. Would you be interested in that? And they said, the mortgages are paid around here on animal testing. I said, it's not an option. With the help of a good FDA attorney, that argument continued until it was clear that we had a case, a defensible case, that we did not need to test on animals. We had the evidence on human trials. And so we became the first toothpaste in the country to be able to market its anti-cavity product without testing on animals. And it was a very significant moment. It was a significant moment in the character of the company. It was a significant moment in the eyes of our competition, because they now knew that they could establish efficacy without testing on animals. We spend $350,000 on every product for human clinical trials to establish safety and efficacy. We spend, alternatively, it costs $20,000 to test on rats. Those are the moments when you have to determine whether you're going to live by your values or not. And those are the moments when you look for the miracle. And the miracle did come. They said, we will accept your human clinicals. We thought that was interesting, too, that since our product is for humans' teeth, that human teeth would be an acceptable standard. Well, those are some of the moments. What I'd like to do is look at another practice we have. If we could go back to slide, or no, let's go to slide 14, if we could. We promote our products every 90 days with our values. We used to do what everyone does in my business, give a discount to the retailer passes it on, you print it up on all these ugly circulars that have ink all over them, and 14% of the people read them, the rest is discarded as waste. And we said, why don't we raise the level of awareness on some important social issues that, again, come out of our values, like drinking water, the quality of our drinking water. So we decided to work with some nonprofit organizations like the Nature Conservancy, the River Network in Oregon, and we asked them, help us put together a knowledge base of what are the problems of our drinking water around the country. We knew it was a serious problem. 10 miles, any river within 10 miles of you, or me, is not drinkable. The quality of our river waters is seriously injured. So if that's a problem, how can we help bring about the solution through some consumer action? And part of the education was to allow you to connect with your own community and to get your local watershed advocacy group and get involved. Meanwhile, we asked the retailers if they would like to bring an end cap display of Tom's of Maine toothpaste, mouthwash, deodorants, and soap, and talk about river awareness and the problems that we have and what they can do, and for you, the retailer, to become involved. Would you be interested in that as a new way of promoting the product? And they said yes. Our customers, our shoppers are interested in things like that. We brought them a platform. They said, we like it. We'll use it as the new way to promote your product. The results for us are that we get a 360% lift in sales. In other words, we sell 3.5 times more product this way than we do normally, and a great deal more than if we just gave a 10% discount that ends up in a circular. If we look at slide 23, we can, I beg your pardon, we're going to go to slide 14. Slide 14 gives us an idea of, is this 14? Okay, yes it is, I beg your pardon. No, thank you for your patience. I think we're all set. That's fine right where you are. If we look at other things that we're doing to practice our values, I think of something like our bank. If we go to slide 8, we can see some other examples of how we are integrating our values. It would be the next slide. If we go to the next slide. Here we are. We finance our business by values. We selected a bank that was more involved in its community, more involved in environmental stewardship than anybody else in Maine. They also were a very good bank. They weren't the largest bank. We may not have gotten the lowest price to finance our debt, but we had a partner that understood us, and we were affirming what they were about in their core values, and so we had a great partnership. When it came time to raise equity, we didn't go to a venture capital firm. We went to individuals, people who were either retired CEOs or second-generation wealth, all of whom were interested in this whole idea of, can we do business differently today by being more intentional about our values? And so we put together a team of about 20 people that became our equity circle, people that had invested a lot of money to help drive Tom's of Maine. I talked about everything hasn't worked out for us. Manufacturing, we had to move. We were running out of space in our own factory. And we had some 60 acres of a campus in Kennebunk that we were designing for a green program, green manufacturing, R&D, and so forth. We collected a team of architects and specialists to help us be sure that we were selecting the right location on the site, so we would be light impact on the site, that we were using the right materials, the orientation to the sun, the way in which we had laid out the interior for manufacturing would be more socially friendly if you were working in the system. It wasn't one production line that started behind me and ended at the end of that room. It turned into a U so that you could look across at your teammates because you were collaboratively working to produce a finished product. There were all kinds of things about this that were fantastic. We got the approvals that we needed. And then, when it came time to finance it, we could not find one bank that would give us any more money on a mortgage than a cinder block building or a steel building. We got zero incremental opportunity of debt financing because this was a green building. The incremental cost, the cost was $12 million for the factory. We could get $3.5 to $4 million to finance it. We could not afford to spend $8 million of our money incrementally to build the green factory. To this day, I am constantly listening to the question of who's building green and how did it get financed. And so far, what I'm hearing is that either the government is financing it or there is enough private equity among the owners that they have the cash to do this. This is a huge problem institutionally in our country today. The banking industry will not recognize the incremental value of green. So we ended up buying a steel building in the next town. We did as much as we could to convert it to some of the thinking that we had used. And as I say, I'm delighted that we've been able to come up with wind energy as our new source. We hire by values. Our core values, our statement of beliefs, are on the website. You cannot apply to Tom's of Maine face-to-face. You must go to the website first. You must fill out the form, and that form talks about what some of your values are, and we begin the dialogue of values right off the bat. And we live by values. 10% of our profits are going towards things that we want to support. When Katrina came along, we had already committed the budget for spending. I imagine most people had committed their budgets. But you just have to recognize in that moment that you've got to rewrite the script. We not only gave cash to Red Cross and to Goodwill Industries of Houston, but we dedicated Friday of one of those weeks entirely to making products for Katrina victims. That meant everybody in the place knew they were getting ready to be of help on Friday. And we sent $225,000 worth of toothpaste, mouthwash, soap, and deodorant to Houston to be spread around throughout the whole southern area. Those are moments when your corporate character comes through and you can't just back away and say, we don't have a solution. And in that same moment, I was delighted to learn when we got our financial statement of operating in our new manufacturing facility that our cost of goods was 4 percentage points better than we had ever experienced it before. And that ended up being bigger than what we had given away that month. So when you operate by values, you can expect a miracle. Our destiny, if we go to the last slide before we sum up, is basically, we're looking at slide 18, is to be the trusted partner in natural care products with consumers with whom we share common values. That's it. We don't care how old you are. We don't care how much income you make. We don't care what sex you are. We don't care what part of the country you live in. All we care about is whether or not we're building a business for people with whom we share common values. Let's look at some of the results as if we go to slide 15. The marketplace results are pretty remarkable. Is this slide 15? Okay, that's fine. This is showing that natural care is the most, first of all, Tom's of Maine is currently the fastest growing toothpaste in America. Of the 10 leading brands, we're number 6 now, and our growth in the last year was 7.5%. Secondly, the categories in which we compete, toothpaste, mouthwash, deodorant, soap, the Tom's of Maine brand is outperforming the growth of that category. So we're driving growth. And what's behind it is the interest in natural and organic and a trademark that people trust. Our gross margins have improved, our profitability has improved, our EBITDA has improved, and we have promotional sales lift that are extraordinary. If we look at the next slide, what can we see is occurring as we are living our values? Our turnover is virtually nil, unless through the process of honest exchange on performance, someone simply isn't able to perform and needs to be re-rolled elsewhere in the company or needs to leave the company. Long-term employment in which people are learning and growing from this community and from this experiment is normal. We have people that have been here for decades, and we have a lot of people who are there for decades. And we're really building a community. You know, we speak about organization. We're building a community of professional and caring people. There isn't an organization chart at Tom's of Maine. If you want to know what your role is, you have a role description, you know who your supervisor is, you know what teams you're on, you know what your work plan is, you know everything you need to know about what your role is and who's going to evaluate you. There is no organizational chart anywhere in the system. So, if we go to slide 19, we can sum up and say, values are essentially integrating the head and the heart for enhanced performance. Values integration is obviously innovative. If you bring something that is both head and heart, I dare say your solution will be new, and it will probably connect with a lot of people. Values integration requires some new tools. We need to learn what those tools are and to help others learn what they are. And values are the root of corporate passion. They are what gives a corporation character and identity. In my 35 years of taking the risk to leave what I was doing and to start this company with the idea that you could be financially successful, working with nature, doing right by customers, I never would have dreamed we would be where we are today. And that's the miracle. It works. It works for everybody, and I applaud you for being part of this 2 days in which you can have a little more confidence from these stories that it can work for you. Thank you very, very much.
We have a little bit of time for some questions. If there's a mic out here in the audience, and if you have any questions for Tom, we can certainly take those.
I'm curious as to what was your initial inspiration. I mean, what drove you early on in the 70s to move in this direction?
I had grown up in an entrepreneur's household. My father had a textile business, and so it was not there was nothing unique about starting your own business from where I came from. If you had an idea, you started it and did it. But I think you know, in the 60s, we were learning a lot about eutrophication, the pollution of our rivers and ponds and streams. And there was just such great corporate insensitivity that it was clear that you could either go to work for the government or a nonprofit organization to try to use influence and education to change the source of the problem, or you could create a business and take market share away from them. And because I was built to be an entrepreneur, I chose to take market share from them.
Any other questions? Yes, there's one right over here in the front. Somebody's coming right up behind you. Hang on.
I find that my convictions are often unable to be played out because of lack of financial wherewithal. And I wonder if you've had some of those same frustrating moments, and obviously with the bank, you weren't able to do what you wanted to do even in the position that you're at now. So maybe talk about the frustrations that we all go through and how to overcome that or get past that.
Well, thank you. I think when our values are in some kind of conflict and we just don't see the solution, that is, we don't find the funding for it, or we don't find acceptance of the idea more broadly, we've got a choice of, watering it down or compromising. But we don't teach compromise at Tom's of Maine or the Saltwater Institute. We teach integration, as integration brings innovation. And it begins by saying no to the alternative. That I don't see an answer today, but that's all right. I have to accept the fact I don't have an answer today. I need to be sure that others know I don't have an answer today, and then I need to wait for the miracle. And the miracle comes 24, 48 hours. It didn't come on the new factory. I still have this wonderful campus in Maine that sits there waiting for our new factory when that day will come. But in the meantime, we've got a pretty good alternative, and we're learning. But I've had to go to friends for money in moments. I had to ask a friend for a $100,000 loan when my business didn't warrant an investment. I had to pick up the phone and ask a friend very directly, I need $100,000, can you give it to me? He said, yes, we'll talk about the details later. There's one example. I think oftentimes the answers are inside us, and we just have to get beyond the fear of what we think the outcome's going to be, but the outcome actually will be different if we keep right on going with what we believe in. Yes? Oh, good.
I wanted to thank you for writing this book. I found it very, very inspirational, particularly working in large corporations. And I'm in procurement, and procurement is never a very popular position to be in because you are managing change to a great extent at every level. But this book is certainly inspiring me to take the risk and make those changes happen.
That makes all my mornings between 4 and 7 a.m. worthwhile.
So would you autograph it for me?
I will.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Yeah, Kay, there's right here.
Thank you. You mentioned a couple of times the growth that's in people's interest in natural care, and I just wonder if you have any idea what's driving that.
Well, people are interested in taking personal responsibility for their health. I wonder why that is. And they find that organic and natural is healthier, tastier. And so it's the people who have educated themselves on what's better living for them, what's better for their families. And they go to these places that are offering natural foods and they learn. And granted, not everything is guaranteed with an efficacious outcome, but that goes with the learning trial and error process. The people that have bought a beverage, an organic beverage or food, constitutes 70% of Americans and $42 billion in sales. That is a huge piece of business. Now, what does it take for our supermarkets to get that message? What's it take for our other corporations to get that message? It's just an enormous opportunity that's being driven by people who have had to think for themselves and and created a new economy based upon a different way of thinking. That worldview that I'm talking about, in which I was just at a convention in Maine, the Maine Organic Farmers and Growers Association meeting, and I learned that 20,000 acres of land is now under organic growing in Maine. That's just a lot when you think about the small farmer, and it's all small farmers. They've created their own economy with restaurants, with food co-ops, with natural food stores. They've created quite an economy. Yes, there's a question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I enjoyed your speech.
Thank you.
I, too, am an entrepreneur. I started a business some 13 years ago, making a textile that was different than anybody else had made. And what I've learned in this time is that some of the hurdles that we had to overcome, because we were making a product that was completely different than the consumer had been accustomed to buying, and we were promoting values in our product that were quite different and quite more expensive. And I would assume that you had some of those same difficulties. And what I've learned throughout my tenure is that what really built our brand was, A, it worked, but B, the magic of marketing. And I'm curious to know, how did you build your brand, and how have you sustained your brand? Because my guess is, and I don't use your toothpaste, but maybe I will, that it's more expensive than the brands that sit on the shelves.
Great. I think knowing our customer, I think you would agree, knowing our customer is critical. We need to know who they are, what they think, how they feel, and what they're looking for. And our customer's looking for information. So when we first came out with our Tom's of Maine toothpaste, all 4 sides weren't branded Tom's of Maine. I mean, if you look at a box of Crest, 3 of the 4 sides are branded Crest. 3 of our 4 sides were information, ingredient, purpose, source of every ingredient in there, what it's for, what's the claim that we're able to make. So in our case, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's true with many premium or quality products where something's been done differently, we need to know the difference for a discerning, intelligent consumer. So we turned our toothpaste box into a kind of biology lesson or whatever to empower them with that knowledge. Then we've done our first television advertising. It's amazing what the marketers want you to do. They want you to sell a toothpaste. I say, no, we're not selling toothpaste. We're selling toothpaste with a set of values, because you can't extricate the values from that product. You know, we're doing more than cleaning teeth. They're buying it for all the halo that goes around that. So we have 4 15-second spots. One of them is a young woman in her bathroom brushing her teeth, and she's got a dog running by, she's got a cat sitting up on the counter, and she's got a bunny between her legs, and she's brushing her teeth. And it's all about the efficacy of the product, but no animal testing. So performance, attributes, and the value, they're inextricable, and that has to be part of our message. And we basically have not cared what our competition has done. We care what our consumer wants and whether or not we're fulfilling that. That's the relationship, and as long as we're good on that, then the numbers come out okay. In short answer, that's essentially it. And I bet you can identify with that. Yeah, good, thank you.
There's a question over here.
Thank you. Now it's working. What's your sense of the relative role and responsibility of the public and not-for-profit sectors versus the private sector, or in coordination with the private sector, in helping to advance acceptance of sustainability?
Well, I think the nonprofit sector needs to be as concerned about what it believes in and what it cares about just as much as what we're talking about this morning as for-profit making people. The know thyself is essential because the quest for grants and donations by the nonprofit will pull the identity all apart of the nonprofit. They'll forget what their purpose is because so-and-so has given them $500,000 or $1 million, and that's a trap we have to be careful of. And so the nonprofit can be of value educationally with its constituency, and it can be involved in advocacy. Now, I personally don't participate in nonprofits that are involved in advocacy. The reason I don't is that I think too much time gets wasted in Washington with the same people working on the same issue, and we're all sending checks for the same issue. I would much rather be involved with a nonprofit that is involved in education and awareness and community building. When I was at this Maine Organic Farmers and Growers Association, there were 20,000 people in a field going through booths and learning about sustainable products. And this thing started probably 15 or 20 years ago, and I had to say to myself, this is truly amazing. This idea has arrived in Maine. People believe it, people are living it, people are making lives this way, and there are all kinds of nonprofits lined up to support that idea of sustainable living, organic growing, and so forth. I prefer, and this is just me, I personally commit I'm on the Nature Conservancy board in Maine. I'm involved in other board work, but I'm interested in advancing the education and awareness of the issue and building a network of people that care about that issue. And so they are important in advocacy, but they're important in being part of the total fabric of what we're trying to educate here. If you go out to talk to global companies about the issues we're talking about, no animal testing, sustainable living, natural and so forth, they still think we're a little shop. They still think that we're an insignificant part of the economy. $42 billion spent last year is not insignificant. 20-25% growth of whole foods is not insignificant as an annual pace. Consumers are driving that. And so I think we, in the nonprofit sector, need to keep our focus on what we're involved in and then to really put our efforts into raising awareness and building a sense of common cause.
I think we have time for one more if there's another question out there. There is one right down here in front.
You trained in divinity, which is a bit unusual for a business leader, and clearly your approach to values was sort of affected by that in the context of business. And I'm just wondering how you're thinking about the way that leaders in business and other fields may train in the future to have a somewhat different view of their mission.
Great. Well, first of all, I studied world religions because I'm just plain interested in philosophy. I grew up in the church as a Christian in the Episcopal Church, but quite frankly, that was not enough to empower me to go do what I wanted to do differently in the marketplace. The bigger we got, the more difficult it was for me to say we need to be putting 10% towards this or that of our profits. That we needed to be thinking about integrating our values into how we promote, how we advertise, and how we hire. What my graduate program did for me was gave me a self-confidence that we did not need to inherit exclusively the profit motive that we had received in this country from our European ancestors. That you could do good while doing well, so long as you held yourself accountable to the standards of society, your customers, your community, the people in the system, your financial stakeholders. It all comes down to accountability. So we've built a more holistic, more integrated, and it's turned out to be a better form of doing business than I wouldn't be here today. Crest and Colgate would have pushed me off the shelf a long time ago. And believe me, they have tried. But you see, the buyer at the store says, people want Toms of Maine, and they want them for certain. We can't touch Toms of Maine. So, in terms of leadership, it's not that I have Christian values or Buddhist or Muslim. It's that I got informed somewhere about what I care deeply about. And then I brought those values as neutral words. I don't bring the word Christ or the Buddha into the marketplace. That's what's working. That's what's going on inside me. But if I'm mentioning Christ, then the Buddhist next to me is saying, why do I have to hear that? So we've got to be more, in my opinion, of course I come from that New England area where we're not the greatest evangelists in the world. But keeping the vocabulary neutral to what are we talking about here? That's why I think we believe such and such, neutral of religious symbols, or our core values are such and such, neutral. That's because that hits here. That hits here. And that's what we're trying to do, is to connect at this level, because we're always trying to connect at this level. And it's amazing how all we have to do is think through it as a human being and as a leader and say, these are the things that are important to me. What do you think of that? And get some dialogue and get some little editing. Other than that, there is an institute at saltwater.org on the website you can go to learn about our leadership programs. It's a nonprofit 501c3 educational foundation. We send our trainers around the country. We have CEOs come to CEO workshops for 4 days to do this, so that's another thing you can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. You've been a wonderful audience. I'm really glad to have been with you. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much.